When we leave, you'll be covered in bruises. My ex said. Hell's Angel was listening right beside me. The evening settled like a heavy blanket over the small bar. Soft jazz played in the background, mixing with the gentle clink of glasses and murmured conversations. Lily sat alone at the counter, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. The amber liquid inside caught the dim light, creating tiny sparkles that reminded her of better days. "Another one?" the bartender asked quietly, his kind eyes meeting hers. He had a gentle way about him, never pushing, just being present. Lily nodded, managing a small smile. "Please." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but he heard her anyway. The bartender slid a fresh drink in front of her, removing the empty glass with practiced ease. He seemed to sense her need for space, moving away to tend to other customers while keeping a watchful eye on her from a distance. The ice clinked against the glass as Lily stirred her drink absently. 3 weeks had passed since she'd finally found the courage to leave Tom. 3 weeks of looking over her shoulder, of jumping at sudden noises, of trying to remember who she was before him. The bruises on her arms had faded to yellow, but the ones on her soul still felt fresh and raw. A couple laughed at the other end of the bar, making Lily flinch slightly. She used to laugh like that once, back when she thought Tom's possessiveness meant he loved her. Back before the control, the manipulation, the fear. Now, even the memory of happiness felt tainted. The bartender placed a bowl of pretzels near her, offering a small act of kindness that made her eyes water. "You okay there?" he asked softly, his voice carrying no judgment, just genuine concern. "I will be," Lily replied, surprising herself with how much she wanted to believe those words. She picked up a pretzel, more for something to do with her hands than from any real hunger. The bar's warm lighting cast long shadows across the wooden counter, creating pockets of darkness and light. Lily felt safer here than in her own apartment, where every creak and footstep in the hallway sent her heart racing. Here, surrounded by strangers and the comforting presence of the observant bartender, she could almost pretend she was normal again. She took another sip of her drink, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Her shoulders began to relax slightly, the constant tension easing just a fraction. The jazz music swelled softly, and Lily closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel something close to peace. The heavy door creaked open, letting in a burst of cool night air. Lily's eyes snapped open, her body tensing instinctively. The peace she'd found shattered like glass as she recognized the familiar footsteps, the way the atmosphere in the bar seemed to shift. Tom stood in the doorway, his silhouette dark against the streetlights outside. His eyes found her immediately, as if he'd known exactly where she would be. A cold smile spread across his face as he began walking toward her, each step deliberate and measured. Lily's hands began to shake. The pretzel bowl suddenly seemed miles away, the bartender's presence no longer enough to make her feel safe. Her throat closed up as Tom approached, his cologne reaching her before he did. That familiar scent that once made her heart race with attraction now made it race with fear. He leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "When we leave, you'll be covered in bruises," he whispered, his voice carrying that terrible promise that Lily knew all too well. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today." Now back to the story. The words hung in the air like poison. Lily's fingers gripped her glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as if Tom's very presence had frozen her in place. But then something changed. A shadow fell over them both, and the air shifted. The space between Lily and Tom was suddenly filled by a wall of black leather and denim. The man who stepped between them moved with a quiet grace that seemed at odds with his size. Lily caught glimpses of tattoos on thick forearms, designs that disappeared beneath rolled-up sleeves. A worn leather vest bore the distinctive patches of the Hell's Angels. The biker stood perfectly still, his broad shoulders blocking Tom from her view. "Is there a problem here?" The biker's voice was low and gravelly, calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. Lily couldn't see his face, but she could see Tom's reaction, the way his smirk faltered, how he took an instinctive step backward. "This is between me and her," Tom said, trying to maintain his threatening tone, but his voice had lost its edge. He attempted to peer around the biker at Lily, but the man shifted slightly, keeping himself firmly between them. "No," the biker said simply. "It's not." The bartender had moved closer, watching the scene unfold with careful attention. The other patrons had gone quiet, the jazz music suddenly seeming too loud in the tense atmosphere. Tom's face twisted with anger, but Lily could see the calculation in his eyes. The biker, though he hadn't moved aggressively or even raised his voice, radiated a quiet danger that made Tom's threats seem hollow in comparison. "You don't know what you're getting involved in," Tom tried again, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "This is just a misunderstanding between—" "I understand perfectly," the biker cut him off. His words were measured, almost gentle, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "And you're leaving. Now." Lily watched as Tom's facade cracked further. His eyes darted around the bar, perhaps looking for allies or witnesses, but found only averted gazes and the bartender's steady stare. His shoulders slumped slightly, though his face remained twisted in anger. "This isn't over," Tom spat, but the words lacked their earlier menace. He gave Lily one final sneer over the biker's shoulder before turning and stalking toward the door. The sound of it slamming behind him echoed through the bar. The biker remained standing for a moment longer, as if ensuring Tom was truly gone. Then, with the same quiet grace, he turned and settled onto the bar stool next to Lily. He signaled to the bartender with 2 fingers. "Whiskey, neat," he said, his voice softer now but still carrying that gravelly quality. The bartender nodded, pouring the drink with steady hands. Lily's own hands were still shaking as she stared at her glass. The biker, she could see his face now, weathered but not unkind, didn't look at her directly. He seemed content to sit in silence, creating a buffer between her and the door Tom had disappeared through. The jazz music gradually reclaimed the space, and conversations around them slowly resumed. Lily felt her breathing begin to steady, though her heart still raced. The biker's presence beside her was solid and reassuring, like a harbor wall against a storm. She wanted to thank him but couldn't find the words. Instead, she sat there, grateful for this unexpected protection as the night settled back into its rhythm around them. The bartender placed a glass of whiskey in front of Jack, the amber liquid catching the dim light. Lily watched from the corner of her eye as the biker took a slow sip, his movements deliberate and unhurried. The leather of his vest creaked softly as he set the glass back down. Her own drink had grown warm, forgotten in the chaos of Tom's appearance. She wrapped her fingers around it again, more for something to hold on to than any desire to drink. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt like a shield, protecting her from the lingering echoes of Tom's threats. "Thank you," Lily finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt small compared to what he'd done, but they were all she could offer. Jack turned slightly, meeting her eyes for the first time. His face was weathered, lined with years of hard living, but his eyes were steady and clear. He gave a small nod, acknowledgement without demanding more conversation than she was ready to give. "You didn't have to do that," she continued, stronger now, "but I'm grateful you did." He took another sip of whiskey before responding. "Some men only understand one language." His voice was quiet, but carried easily over the music. "Your ex seems like that type." Lily's fingers tightened around her glass. "How did you know he was my ex?" A ghost of a smile touched Jack's lips. "The way he looked at you, like something he thought he owned." He shrugged one shoulder, his expression darkening. "Seen it before." The bartender drifted over, refilling Lily's water without being asked. She nodded her thanks, noticing how the other customers had resumed their conversations, though a few still cast curious glances their way. "I'm Lily," she offered, realizing they hadn't properly introduced themselves. "Jack," he replied simply. His massive hands dwarfed his whiskey glass, but he handled it with surprising gentleness. The jazz music shifted to a slower tune, and Lily felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Jack's presence beside her was solid and reassuring, like a breakwater against a stormy sea. Despite his intimidating appearance, the tattoos that crept up his neck, the scarred knuckles, the well-worn leather vest, there was something calming about him. She opened her mouth to say something else, but her phone buzzed against the bar top. The screen lit up with a message notification. Lily's hand trembled as she reached for it, already knowing who it was from. Tom's message glowed on the screen. "I'll find you. I always do." The words sent ice through her veins. Her breath caught in her throat as the familiar fear gripped her heart. The bar suddenly felt too small, too exposed. She looked at Jack, unable to hide the panic in her eyes. He glanced at her phone, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. In that moment, his calm presence was the only thing keeping her from bolting out the door. But Tom could be out there, waiting. He'd done it before. The thought made her hands shake so badly she had to put the phone down. Jack studied Lily's trembling hands, his weathered face softening with understanding. He pushed his whiskey glass aside and turned to face her fully, his broad shoulders creating a protective barrier between her and the rest of the bar. "Listen," he said, his voice low and steady. "Men like him, they feed on fear. They need it like they need air." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But you're not alone anymore." Lily's fingers twisted around her glass, her knuckles white. "You don't know Tom," she whispered. "He doesn't give up. He'll keep coming back until someone stands in his way," Jack finished. His calm certainty made her look up. There was something in his eyes, not pity, but a deep understanding that made her wonder what battles he'd fought in his own past. "I can't ask you to do that," Lily said, shaking her head. "You don't even know me, and he's dangerous when he's angry." Jack's laugh was soft and without humor. "I've seen dangerous men before." He gestured to his Hell's Angels vest. "Kind of comes with the territory." The bartender passed by, giving them a concerned glance. The evening crowd had thinned, leaving mostly regulars who seemed absorbed in their own conversations. Through the windows, the streetlights cast long shadows across the parking lot. "He won't get to you," Jack continued. "Not with me around." He pulled a napkin from the bar and took out a pen from his vest pocket. His handwriting was surprisingly neat as he wrote down his number. "Day or night. If he shows up, if he messages you again, you call." Lily stared at the number, emotion thick in her throat. The simple act of kindness from this stranger made her eyes burn. "Why?" she managed. "Why would you help me?" Jack was quiet for a moment, running his thumb along the edge of his glass. "Because someone should have helped my sister when she needed it." The words came out rough, weighted with old pain. The admission hung between them, honest and raw. Lily carefully folded the napkin and tucked it into her purse. Her hands had stopped shaking, but uncertainty still churned in her stomach. "I should go," she said finally, gathering her things. "I have work early tomorrow." Jack nodded, not pushing. "Want me to walk you to your car?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I need to do this, but thank you." She meant it for more than just the offer. Standing up, Lily adjusted her purse strap across her body. Despite Jack's reassurance, despite the number tucked safely in her purse, dread still clung to her like a shadow. Tom's message seemed to pulse from her phone, a reminder that he was out there, watching, waiting. She took a deep breath, trying to draw strength from Jack's words. "You're not alone anymore." But trust was a difficult thing to rebuild once it had been shattered. Part of her wanted to believe in the protection this stranger offered, while another part whispered that she was foolish to rely on anyone but herself. With a final glance at Jack, who remained at the bar watching over her departure, Lily headed for the door. Each step felt heavy with indecision, her mind already racing through the dark possibilities of what, or who, might be waiting outside. The key turned in Lily's lock with a familiar click. She stepped into her small apartment, immediately flipping on every light switch within reach. The darkness had always made her uneasy, but tonight it felt especially threatening. Her hands moved methodically through her security routine: deadbolt, chain lock, window latches. Each click and snap helped calm her racing heart. The living room felt empty, yet somehow too full of shadows. Her worn blue couch, usually a source of comfort after long days, seemed to loom in the corner. The ticking of her wall clock echoed through the silence. Lily dropped her purse on the kitchen counter, Tom's threatening words still ringing in her ears. "When we leave, you'll be covered in bruises." She shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. The memory of his breath on her ear made her skin crawl. But then another image pushed through: Jack's broad shoulders forming a wall between her and Tom, his quiet strength offering protection without demanding anything in return. Lily walked to her bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. In the mirror, her reflection looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, telling the story of too many sleepless nights. The woman staring back at her seemed different somehow. Still scared, yes, but not completely alone anymore. Back in the kitchen, she pulled out the napkin with Jack's number. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant for such rough-looking hands. She traced the digits with her finger, remembering how he'd mentioned his sister. There had been pain in his voice, raw and real. It made him human in a way his intimidating appearance didn't suggest. The microwave clock blinked 11:42 p.m. Lily knew she should try to sleep, but anxiety kept her pacing. She checked her phone. No new messages from Tom, but that almost made it worse. Silence from him usually meant he was planning something. She jumped at a sudden knock on her door. Her heart leaped into her throat as she crept toward the entrance. Through the peephole, she saw Jack's familiar figure, his leather vest unmistakable even in the dim hallway light. Lily's fingers hesitated on the chain lock. Trust didn't come easily anymore, but something about Jack's steady presence made her want to try. She opened the door, leaving the chain in place. "Hey," Jack said softly, his voice gravelly but gentle. "Just wanted to make sure you got home okay." Lily felt warmth spread through her chest at the simple gesture. She closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it fully. "I did. Thank you." Jack stood with his hands in his pockets, somehow making his imposing frame seem less threatening. "No other trouble?" he asked, glancing down the hallway as if checking for threats. "No," Lily replied, managing a small smile. "It's been quiet," he nodded, satisfied. "Good." There was an awkward pause before he added, "You've got my number if anything changes." "I do." Lily leaned against the doorframe, feeling strangely safe in his presence. The fear that had been crushing her chest all evening seemed to loosen its grip. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. It wasn't attraction exactly, more like recognition. Two people who understood what it meant to carry invisible wounds. "Well," Jack said, straightening up, "I'll let you get some rest." "Thank you," Lily said again, meaning it for more than just the visit. "For everything." Jack gave her a slight nod, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. As he turned to leave, Lily felt something settle inside her. A quiet certainty that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone in this fight as she'd thought. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Jerry's diner, casting warm rectangles of light across the worn formica tables. Lily stirred her coffee, watching the cream create swirling patterns in the dark liquid. Across from her, Jack sat with his own cup, his massive frame making the booth seem smaller than it was. It had become their routine over the past few days, meeting here for breakfast before Lily headed to work. Jack would arrive first, always choosing the booth with the best view of both exits. Today, though, something felt different. The usual comfortable silence between them held an expectant quality. "I wasn't always like this," Jack said suddenly, his voice low enough that only Lily could hear. His fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, his eyes focused on some distant point. Before the bikes, before everything, I was a soldier. Lily set her spoon down, giving him her full attention. She'd wondered about the military tattoo on his forearm, but had never asked. 3 tours in Afghanistan, he continued, his shoulders tense under his leather vest. Came back different. We all did. He took a slow sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. Lost my best friend over there, Tommy. One minute we were joking about his kid's first birthday coming up. The next. He shook his head, leaving the sentence unfinished. The waitress appeared with their usual order: eggs over easy for Jack, wheat toast for Lily. They waited until she moved away before continuing. When I got home, nothing made sense anymore. Jack's voice carried the weight of memories. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't relate to anyone who hadn't been there. Started riding motorcycles because it was the only time my mind would quiet down. Lily watched his hands, strong and calloused, wrapped around the coffee cup. She noticed a slight tremor that he quickly steadied. The hellsangels, he paused, choosing his words carefully. They understood something about brotherhood, about having each other's backs. Didn't ask questions about the nightmares or the anger. Just gave me a place to belong when nowhere else made sense. A truck rumbled past outside, making the silverware rattle slightly. Jack's eyes automatically scanned the entrance before settling back on his plate. Did some things I'm not proud of, he admitted. But I'm trying to be better now. My sister, she helped me see that there's more to life than just surviving. Lily reached across the table, hesitating for just a moment before placing her hand over his. The touch was brief, but meaningful. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. Jack looked at their hands, then met her eyes. The hardness in his face softened slightly. Guess what I'm trying to say is, I understand what it's like to feel trapped by your past, to think you'll never be more than what hurt you. Lily felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time, she saw past the tattoos and leather, past the intimidating exterior. She saw someone who, like her, was fighting to rebuild themselves from broken pieces. They finished their breakfast in comfortable silence, but something had changed. Jack wasn't just her protector anymore. He was someone who understood her pain, who carried his own wounds but still found the strength to help others. As they prepared to leave, Lily found herself studying his profile, seeing not just the tough biker who had stepped between her and danger, but a man whose complexity matched her own. The evening air had grown chilly as Lily left the bookstore where she worked. Streetlights flickered to life one by one, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Her shoes clicked against the concrete as she walked, her mind already on the warm cup of tea waiting for her at home. That's when she saw him. Tom stood across the street, half hidden in the shadow of an old oak tree. He wasn't moving, wasn't trying to approach her. He just stood there, watching. The familiar sick feeling rose in her stomach as she quickened her pace. Her hands trembled as she dug through her purse, searching for her phone. The weight of Tom's stare followed her, making her skin crawl. She fought the urge to run, knowing that's exactly what he wanted, to see her scared, to know he still had power over her. A car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating Tom's face. The smirk he wore made her breath catch in her throat. He looked exactly like he had that night at the bar, right before he'd threatened her, right before Jack had stepped in. Lily turned the corner onto Cedar Street, her heart pounding. The familiar shops and cafes that usually brought her comfort now felt like a maze of dark windows and deeper shadows. She glanced back. Tom hadn't moved from his spot, but his mere presence was enough to make the 3 blocks to her apartment feel like miles. Her fingers finally closed around her phone. She pulled it out, nearly dropping it in her haste. Jack's number was first in her recent calls. They'd talked just that morning about meeting for coffee tomorrow. Now, as she pressed the call button, she felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Was she becoming too dependent on him? Was it fair to keep pulling him into her problems? The phone rang once, twice. Lily's pace quickened as she passed the darkened windows of the closed flower shop. Behind her, a dog barked, making her jump. "Lily?" Jack's voice was clear and steady through the phone. "Jack," she breathed, relief flooding through her. "I'm sorry to bother you, but—" She swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "Tom's here. He's not doing anything, just watching. I'm walking home from work and— Where are you exactly?" The background noise on his end suggested he was already moving. "Cedar Street, just past Mary's Flowers. I'm heading home." "I'm on my way." His voice carried absolute certainty. "Stay on the main street. Keep walking. Don't stop, but don't run either. You hear me?" "Yes," she whispered, clutching the phone tighter. "Thank you, Jack. I'm sorry to—" "Don't apologize," he cut her off gently. "This is what I'm here for. 5 minutes, tops." Lily could hear the rumble of his motorcycle starting up. The sound, even through the phone, made her shoulders relax slightly. But mixed with the relief was a nagging sense of guilt. How many times had she called him now? How many times had he dropped everything to come to her rescue? She kept walking, phone pressed to her ear, listening to the steady sound of Jack's breathing and his bike's engine. The knowledge that he was coming both comforted and troubled her. She was grateful, so grateful for his protection. But a small voice inside wondered if she'd ever be strong enough to handle these situations on her own. "I'm turning onto Cedar now," Jack said, and Lily felt tears of relief prick at her eyes. She hated feeling this vulnerable, hated needing someone this much. But right now, hearing Jack's motorcycle growing louder in both the phone and the distance, she couldn't deny how much safer she felt knowing he was near. The rumble of Jack's Harley echoed through the quiet street as he pulled up in front of Lily's apartment building. She stood on the steps, wearing jeans and a light jacket, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. The evening sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. "Ever been on a motorcycle before?" Jack asked, his voice carrying a hint of warmth she'd grown familiar with over the past weeks. Lily shook her head, eyeing the massive black bike with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Never. Is it safe?" Jack's eyes crinkled at the corners as he handed her a spare helmet. "Safer than being alone in that bar was." His attempted humor made her smile despite herself. "Just hold on to me and lean when I lean. That's all there is to it." The leather of the helmet felt smooth against her fingers as she slipped it on. Jack helped her adjust the strap, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle. The visor clicked into place, and suddenly the world looked different, more focused, more immediate. "Ready?" he asked, already settled on the bike. Lily swung her leg over the seat, grateful she'd worn jeans instead of her usual skirt. The leather seat was warm from the evening sun, and she could feel the bike's idle vibration through her whole body. Hesitantly, she wrapped her arms around Jack's waist, feeling the solid presence of him. "Hold on tight," he said, and kicked the bike into gear. The first few minutes were terrifying. Every turn made her grip tighter, every acceleration caused her breath to catch. But gradually, something changed. The fear melted into exhilaration. The wind whipped past them as they left the city behind, trading concrete and traffic for winding roads and open spaces. Lily found herself relaxing, her body moving naturally with Jack's as they leaned into curves. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the wind sang past her helmet. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt truly free. There was no looking over her shoulder here, no checking her phone for threatening messages. Just the road, the wind, and the steady presence of Jack guiding them through the twilight. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes. Jack seemed to know exactly where he was going, taking them up winding mountain roads until they reached a secluded overlook. The city spread out below them like a carpet of twinkling lights, peaceful from this distance. Jack cut the engine, and the sudden silence felt profound. They sat there for a moment, neither speaking, just watching the city lights flicker on one by one as darkness settled over the valley. Lily pulled off her helmet, letting the cool evening air play across her flushed cheeks. "That was," she started, searching for the right words. "I know," Jack said simply, understanding in his voice. They climbed off the bike and walked to a wooden bench near the edge of the overlook. The city hummed distantly below them, but up here, everything was quiet and still. A hawk circled lazily overhead, riding the evening thermals. Lily closed her eyes, savoring the lingering sensation of freedom the ride had given her. Beside her, Jack was a solid, reassuring presence, content to share the silence. For the first time since Tom had entered that bar weeks ago, Lily felt completely at peace. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, casting warm patches of light across the worn formica table where Jack and Lily sat. Their coffee cups steamed between them, and the familiar clatter of plates and gentle murmur of conversation created a comfortable backdrop. They'd been meeting here more often lately, finding solace in their shared morning routine. Today, Jack seemed different, more subdued than usual, his eyes carrying a distant look as he stirred his coffee absently. "You okay?" Lily asked softly, noticing the way his shoulders tensed slightly at the question. Jack took a slow breath, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "Just remembering." He paused, then added, "Today's kind of a tough day. Lost some good friends years ago." Lily waited patiently, giving him space to continue if he wanted to. The waitress stopped by to refill their cups, and Jack nodded his thanks before speaking again. "We were in Afghanistan," he said, his voice low and rough. "Mike, Dave, and Carlos. We'd been through basic together, served 3 tours. They were more than friends. They were brothers." He swallowed hard, his hands wrapping around the warm coffee cup. "One day, everything just went wrong. IED on the road. I was in the lead vehicle, they were behind. I survived. They didn't." Lily's heart ached at the pain in his voice. She'd never heard him speak about his military service before, and now she understood why the weight of it showed in his eyes sometimes. "I carried that guilt for years," Jack continued. "Kept thinking maybe if I'd spotted something, noticed something." He shook his head. "Ended up pretty messed up after that. The hellsangels, they gave me somewhere to belong when I couldn't fit anywhere else. Wasn't always the best choice, but at the time, it was all I had." "Thank you for telling me," Lily said softly. She understood what it meant for him to share this, how trust had to be earned in small moments like these. Jack looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers. "You know, you're the first person I've talked to about this in a long time." Lily felt the weight of his words. She found herself sharing too, telling him about her own struggles, how she'd lost herself bit by bit in the law, her relationship with Tom, how hard it had been to finally break free. "It's like you forget who you are," she explained, stirring her coffee. "Every day, it's just a little bit more of yourself that slips away, until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person looking back." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "But you found your way back. That takes courage." "I'm still finding my way," she admitted. "Some days are harder than others." The morning light had shifted, creating patterns on the table between them. Their conversation flowed easily now, the weight of their shared confidences making the space between them feel safer, more intimate. Jack's hand moved across the table, coming to rest gently on top of hers. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it sent warmth spreading through her chest. Lily looked up, meeting his eyes, and found herself returning his soft smile. In that moment, something shifted inside her, a flutter of possibility, of trust cautiously unfurling. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Lily felt hope blooming in her chest, tender and new. The office buzzed with the usual Monday morning activity. Lily sat at her desk, organizing files and responding to emails. The weekend with Jack had left her feeling stronger, more centered. She even caught herself smiling as she typed. The peaceful atmosphere shattered when the elevator doors dinged open. Tom's voice boomed across the office floor before she even saw him. "Where is she?" His footsteps echoed through the suddenly quiet workspace. "Lily!" Her fingers froze over the keyboard. Her heart jumped into her throat as Tom rounded the corner of her cubicle, his face twisted with anger. Several coworkers peered over their desks, watching the scene unfold. "What are you doing here?" Lily's voice came out smaller than she wanted, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "What am I doing here?" Tom's laugh was harsh, bitter. "That's rich coming from you. You think you can just walk away from everything we built together?" He slammed his hand on her desk, making her jump. Papers scattered to the floor. "Please leave," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is my workplace." "Your workplace?" Tom's voice rose higher. "You wouldn't even have this job if it wasn't for me. I got you this position, or did you conveniently forget that too?" Sarah from HR appeared at the edge of the cubicle. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Tom ignored her completely. "You're nothing without me, Lily. You know that, right? Look at you, hanging around with some criminal biker. Is that really better than what we had?" The mention of Jack made Lily's cheeks burn. She stood up, her chair rolling back against the wall. "You need to go, Tom." "You abandoned me," Tom shouted, his face red with rage. "After everything I did for you, you're nothing but a selfish, ungrateful—" "Security has been called," Sarah announced firmly. But Tom wasn't finished. "You think that biker cares about you? He's using you, Lily. Just wait until he shows his true colors. You'll come crawling back. You always do." The cruel words hit Lily like physical blows. Memories of years of similar verbal attacks flooded back. The way he'd tear her down, make her question herself, make her feel worthless. Her vision blurred with tears. "I said leave!" Her voice cracked as she grabbed her purse. Tom stepped closer, his voice dropping to that familiar, threatening whisper. "You're making a big mistake." Lily couldn't breathe. The walls of her cubicle seemed to close in. Her co-workers' stares burned into her skin. Without another word, she pushed past Tom and ran toward the exit, ignoring Sarah calling her name. She burst through the building's front doors, gasping for air. The bright morning sunlight disoriented her for a moment. Then she felt strong, steady arms wrap around her, pulling her close. "I've got you." Jack's deep voice rumbled in her ear. He must have been waiting outside, as he often did lately. Lily collapsed against his chest, her tears soaking into his leather vest. His arms tightened around her protectively as she shook. "You don't have to face him alone anymore," Jack murmured, one hand gently stroking her hair. "We'll deal with the past together. No more running scared, okay?" She nodded against his chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. For the first time, she truly believed she could face her fears, not just because Jack was there to protect her, but because he made her feel strong enough to protect herself. The old pickup truck rumbled down a winding dirt road, kicking up dust in the late afternoon sun. Jack had borrowed it from a friend, knowing his motorcycle wouldn't be the best choice for where he wanted to take Lily. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the city fade behind them through the side mirror. They pulled up to a small clearing overlooking a valley. Wild grass swayed in the gentle breeze, and an old oak tree provided the perfect spot for shade. Jack grabbed a worn blanket from the truck bed and spread it beneath the tree. "It's beautiful here," Lily said softly, settling down on the blanket. The city sprawled out below them, but from this distance it looked peaceful, almost magical in the golden light. "Found this place years ago," Jack said, sitting beside her. "Come here sometimes to think." Lily drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "What do you think about?" Jack was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "Mistakes, mostly. Things I wish I'd done different." "Like what?" He picked at a loose thread on the blanket. After the military, I was angry, lost, did things I'm not proud of. His voice grew rough. Hurt people, got into fights. The Hell's Angels, they gave me somewhere to belong when I needed it. But sometimes I wonder if I just traded one war for another. Lily reached out, touching his hand gently. We all have regrets, Jack. Yeah. He turned his hand over, letting their fingers intertwine. What about you? Any regrets? She watched a hawk circle lazily overhead. Staying with Tom for so long, believing I deserved the way he treated me, letting him convince me I was worthless. Her voice cracked slightly. Jack squeezed her hand. You're not worthless, Lily. Never were. I know that now. She looked at him, really looked at him, the weathered face, the gentle eyes that contrasted so sharply with his tough exterior. You helped me see that. They talked as the sun made its slow descent, casting long shadows across the valley. Jack told her about his childhood in a small town, about joining the military straight out of high school, about losing friends in combat. Lily shared stories of her own, her dreams of becoming an artist, abandoned when Tom convinced her it was pointless, her strained relationship with her parents, who never understood why she stayed with him. As the sky turned pink and orange, Jack stood up, offering Lily his hand. Should probably get you home before it gets dark. The drive back was comfortable, filled with the kind of silence that comes from having said exactly what needed to be said. When they reached Lily's apartment building, Jack walked her to her door, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Thank you, Lily said, turning to face him. For today. For everything. Jack stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Lily leaned into his touch, her heart beating faster. When their lips met, it was soft and careful, like a question being asked. Then Lily's hands found their way to Jack's shoulders, and the kiss deepened, becoming an answer, a promise of something more. When they finally pulled apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, sharing the same breath. In that moment, everything felt possible. Healing, hope, a future neither of them had dared to imagine before. The evening crowd at Murphy's bar was thin, just a handful of regulars scattered among the wooden tables. Lily sat at her usual spot, her fingers wrapped around a glass of ginger ale. She'd started coming here more often lately, finding comfort in the familiar surroundings and the knowledge that Jack would join her soon after his shift ended. The door creaked open, letting in a gust of cool air. Lily's heart dropped as Tom walked in, his face twisted with barely contained rage. He looked different than she remembered, disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes and a wild look that made her stomach turn. Well, well, Tom sneered, stalking toward her. Look who's here all alone. His words slurred slightly, the smell of whiskey heavy on his breath as he leaned against the bar next to her. Lily's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. Leave me alone, Tom. Leave you alone? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. After everything we had, after you threw it all away for some criminal biker, his voice rose with each word, drawing concerned looks from other patrons. The bartender stepped forward. Sir, I think you should stay out of this, Tom snapped, slamming his hand on the bar. He turned back to Lily, his eyes burning with hatred. You think you're better than me now? Think your new boyfriend's gonna save you? Lily stood up, grabbing her purse. I'm leaving. Tom's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. You're not going anywhere. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I told you what would happen if you left me. Remember? Remember how I said I'd make you regret it? The fear that had controlled Lily for so long threatened to paralyze her. But something else sparked inside her. Anger, defiance, strength she didn't know she had. Let go. She tried to pull away, but Tom's grip tightened. Or what? He yanked her closer, his face inches from hers. What are you going to do about it? You're nothing without me. Nothing but a scared little... A large shadow fell over them. Jack stood there, his presence filling the space like a gathering storm. His face was calm, but his eyes blazed with controlled fury. "Take your hand off her," Jack said, his voice low and steady. Tom's grip loosened slightly, but he didn't let go. "This isn't your business, Biker. I'm making it my business." Jack took a step closer, his shoulders squared. "Last chance. Let her go." The bar had gone silent, the tension thick enough to cut. Tom looked from Jack to Lily, his jaw clenching. For a moment, it seemed like he might try something stupid, but self-preservation won out. He released Lily's arm, taking a step back. "You think you're tough?" Tom sneered at Jack, trying to save face. "You and your little biker gang? You're just trash, and she'll figure that out soon enough." Jack didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't show any reaction at all. He simply stood there, a wall between Tom and Lily, his presence enough to make Tom's bravado crumble. Tom's eyes darted around the bar, seeing the witnesses, realizing he was outnumbered and outmatched. With a final glare at Lily, he backed away toward the door. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. As Tom slunk out of the bar, the tension in the room broke like a fever. Lily let out a shaky breath, her legs feeling weak. Jack turned to her, his expression softening as he checked her arm where Tom had grabbed her. The noise of the bar faded into the background as Lily sat in a corner booth, her hands still trembling slightly. Jack had gotten her a fresh ginger ale, and she wrapped her fingers around the cool glass, trying to ground herself. The ice clinked softly as she lifted it to her lips, but she couldn't bring herself to drink. "You're safe now," Jack said quietly from across the table. His presence was steady, reliable, like always. Lily nodded, but her mind was racing. The confrontation with Tom had shaken loose all the doubts she'd been trying to bury. She glanced at Jack's tattooed hands resting on the table, remembering how gentle they'd been when he'd checked her arm for bruises. How different they were from Tom's grasping fingers. She started, then stopped, struggling to find the words. "Sometimes I feel like I'm trading one dependency for another." The admission came out barely above a whisper. Jack's expression remained calm, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "With Tom, I lost myself completely. Everything I did, everything I thought, it was all about him." Lily traced the condensation on her glass with her finger. "And now, with you, I find myself thinking about you all the time, waiting for you to show up, feeling safer when you're around. What if I'm just replacing one person to lean on with another?" The evening crowd's chatter seemed to grow louder in the silence that followed. Jack didn't rush to respond, and Lily appreciated that about him, how he always took time to consider his words. "There's a difference," he finally said, "between depending on someone who takes your power away and accepting help from someone who wants you to stand on your own." Lily looked up at him, really looked at him. His weathered face, the small scar above his eyebrow, the quiet strength in his posture. "But how do I know? Tom seemed different at first too." "Because I'm not asking you to need me," Jack replied. "I'm here because I want to be, and you're free to walk away any time you choose." He leaned forward slightly. "That's what scares Tom, that you made that choice, that you have that power." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Sometimes I still hear his voice in my head, telling me I'm nothing without him, that I'll never really be free." Jack reached across the table, offering his hand palm up, an invitation, not a demand. After a moment, Lily placed her hand in his. "Listen to me," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "What happened back there? That was all you. You stood up to him. You found your voice. I was just backup." A small laugh escaped through Lily's tears. "Some backup. The point is," Jack continued, squeezing her hand lightly, "you're stronger than you know. You don't need anyone to complete you or control you. Not Tom, not me, not anyone." Lily felt something shift inside her chest, like a weight she'd been carrying was finally beginning to lift. Jack stood up and moved to her side of the booth, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, accepting the comfort, but recognizing, maybe for the first time, that it was her choice to do so. "You don't have to carry his threats anymore," Jack murmured. "You don't have to live in fear of his shadow. That power he had over you? It's gone. You took it back." Lily closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the solid warmth of Jack's presence beside her. Not a cage, not a replacement for her old prison, but a shelter she could step in and out of as she chose. The realization settled over her like a warm blanket, and for the first time since Tom had walked into the bar, she felt her muscles truly relax. The neon sign from the diner cast a soft blue glow through the window, playing across Jack's face as he sat across from Lily. His coffee had gone cold, untouched as his fingers traced the rim of the ceramic mug. The late-night crowd had thinned out, leaving them in relative privacy in their corner booth. "I wasn't always like this," Jack began, his voice low and rough. He gestured to his tattooed arms and leather vest. "Used to wear a different kind of uniform." Lily waited patiently, giving him the same space he'd always given her to find his words. "Marines," he continued. "Served 3 tours. Thought I was doing something good, you know? Making a difference." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Lost my best friend over there, Tommy. We'd known each other since high school, joined up together." His hands tightened around the coffee mug. "It was my call. I was leading the patrol. Should have seen the signs, should have known something wasn't right." Jack's voice cracked slightly. "Tommy paid the price for my mistake." Lily reached across the table, placing her hand over his. He didn't pull away. "Coming home was rough. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't hold down a job. Started drinking too much." Jack's eyes stayed fixed on their joined hands. "Got into fights, bad ones. Ended up doing 18 months for assault." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jack collected himself. "In prison, I met some guys from the club. They understood what it was like, having that darkness inside, having regrets that eat at you. When I got out, they took me in." He finally looked up at Lily. "Did some things I'm not proud of with the club. Helped collect debts, ran protection rackets. Thought it was giving me purpose, but I was just running from myself." A waitress quietly refilled their coffee cups, but neither reached for them. "Then last year, I got a letter." Jack's voice softened. "Tommy's little sister tracked me down. She didn't blame me. Said Tommy would have wanted me to forgive myself." He swallowed hard. "That's when I started pulling back from the club's darker business. Started trying to do better." Lily watched as Jack's tough exterior seemed to crack, showing the pain he usually kept hidden. His shoulders, usually so straight and strong, carried the visible weight of his past. "The night I met you," he said, meeting her eyes, "I was thinking about Tommy, about all the times I couldn't save him. Then I heard what that guy said to you and—" He shook his head. "Maybe I thought helping you would make up for something. But it's more than that now." Lily felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She saw Jack differently now, not as the intimidating biker who'd first stepped between her and Tom, but as someone who understood pain, who'd walked through darkness and was still trying to find his way to the light. "We've all got scars," Jack said quietly. "Some you can see, some you can't, but they don't have to define us." Looking at him now, Lily saw past the tattoos and the leather. She saw someone who'd lost his way, but was fighting to find it again. Someone who, despite everything he'd been through, still had the capacity to care, to protect, to love. His flaws and mistakes didn't make him dangerous. They made him human. The diner's clock ticked softly as they sat in comfortable silence, both understanding that sometimes the deepest connections come from sharing our darkest truths. The fall fair had transformed the town square into a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Children darted between stalls clutching cotton candy, and the smell of popcorn and caramel apples drifted through the crisp autumn air. Lily watched as Jack's expression softened at the sight of a little girl hugging a stuffed bear almost as big as she was. "Never thought I'd see a Hell's Angel at a county fair," Lily teased, nudging his arm. Jack's mouth quirked up in a half-smile. First time for everything. He was wearing his usual leather vest, but something about him seemed lighter today, more at ease. They strolled past game booths where teenagers tried their luck at ring toss and balloon darts. An old couple on a bench smiled at them as they passed. Lily realized that she wasn't worried about being seen in public anymore. The fear that had kept her isolated for so long was fading. "Used to come to fairs like this with my dad," Jack said, surprising her. He rarely spoke about his family. Before he started drinking, he'd lift me onto his shoulders so I could see over the crowd. Lily squeezed his hand. "My mom loved these things too. She'd make us try every kind of pie at the baking contest." A group of local musicians had set up near the gazebo, playing folk songs that floated over the fairground. Jack led Lily to a quiet spot near the band, away from the main crowd. "Sometimes I wonder what she'd think of me now," Lily admitted, watching couples sway to the music. "After everything with Tom, staying with him as long as I did." "She'd be proud," Jack said firmly. "Takes guts to walk away, to start over." Lily looked up at him, seeing the conviction in his eyes. "Like you did?" He nodded slowly. "Different circumstances, same choice. Deciding not to let the past own you anymore." They wandered through the craft stalls, stopping to admire hand-carved wooden figures and homemade quilts. An elderly woman was selling fresh flowers, and Jack bought Lily a small bouquet of wildflowers without ceremony, just handed them to her with that quiet gentleness that still surprised her. "Thank you," she said, breathing in their sweet scent. "Not just for the flowers, for everything." "You don't need to thank me," he replied, but his eyes were warm. As the afternoon sun began to dip, they left the fair behind, walking the familiar streets of their small town. Shop windows glowed invitingly, and the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Jack's hand found hers, strong and steady. "You know," Lily said, "I used to think I'd never feel normal again. Like I'd always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next bad thing to happen." "And now?" She smiled, looking at their joined hands. "Now I'm starting to remember who I was before all that, who I can still be." They passed the diner where they'd first really talked, where Jack had shown her that not all strength comes from violence. The bar where he'd first protected her was just visible down the street, but it didn't hold the same shadow over her anymore. "We've both got history," Jack said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But that's all it is, history." Lily nodded, feeling the truth of it in her bones. The past would always be there, but it didn't have to define their future. What mattered was this moment, walking hand in hand through the gathering dusk, choosing their own path forward. Lily's phone buzzed on her kitchen counter while she was making tea. Steam rose from her favorite mug, the one with tiny painted flowers that reminded her of better days. Her hand trembled as she reached for the device. The message from Tom glowed on her screen. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." Her chest tightened, and the mug slipped from her grip, clattering against the counter but miraculously not breaking. Tea splashed across the surface, but Lily barely noticed. Her breath came in short gasps as she stared at those 8 words. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too exposed. The window above her sink showed only darkness, and every shadow seemed to hold a threat. She backed away from the counter until she hit the wall, sliding down to sit on the cold tile floor. More messages started coming in. "Think you can just move on? That biker won't always be around. Remember what happens when you make me angry." Lily's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the phone. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in around her. Every creak of the building made her jump. Her mind raced with memories of Tom's anger, of the times he'd followed through on his threats. The clock on her wall ticked loudly in the silence. 9:47 p.m. Too late to call anyone, too late to run. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear. Another buzz. But this time it was different. A call from Jack. She answered on the first ring, her voice barely a whisper. "Jack?" Something felt wrong, he said, his deep voice steady and familiar. "You okay?" The tears she'd been holding back started to fall. "Tom, he's sending messages, threats. I'm on my way." No hesitation, no questions asked. "It's late, you don't have to." 10 minutes, he said firmly. "Lock your doors. I'll text when I'm outside." Lily nodded, even though he couldn't see her. She stayed on the floor, phone clutched to her chest, counting the seconds. The ticking clock marked each moment. 8 minutes passed. 9. A gentle knock at her door made her jump. But then came Jack's text. "It's me." She scrambled to her feet, checking the peephole before unlocking the door. Jack stood there in his leather jacket, looking like he'd rushed over. His eyes swept over her, checking for signs of trouble. "Can I come in?" Lily stepped back, letting him enter. He closed and locked the door behind him, then turned to her. Without a word, he opened his arms. She fell into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and motor oil. His arms wrapped around her, strong and secure, and finally the trembling began to subside. "Show me the messages," he said softly. She handed him her phone, watching his expression darken as he read. But when he looked at her again, his eyes were gentle. "You're safe," he said, pulling her close again. "I've got you." In that moment, wrapped in Jack's protective embrace, something shifted in Lily's heart. This wasn't just about feeling protected anymore. She trusted him, truly trusted him. For the first time since leaving Tom, she could see beyond the fear, could imagine a future where she wasn't always looking over her shoulder. She relaxed into his arms, letting out a shaky breath. The threatening messages still existed on her phone, but they held less power now. Jack's steady heartbeat under her ear reminded her that she wasn't alone anymore. The pounding on Lily's apartment door shattered the peaceful morning silence. She knew that aggressive knock, had heard it too many times before. Her coffee mug froze halfway to her lips as Tom's voice boomed through the wood. "Open the door, Lily. I know you're in there." Her hands trembled, but something else stirred inside her. A spark of anger that had been building for weeks. She set her mug down carefully on the kitchen counter and walked to the door, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Through the peephole, she saw Tom's distorted face, red with fury. He wore his expensive suit, the one he always used to intimidate people in business meetings. His fist raised to pound again. "I said open up." Lily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Go away, Tom. I have nothing to say to you." "Nothing to say?" He laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "How about explaining why you're running around with some criminal biker, making me look like a fool?" "I don't owe you any explanations." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "We're done. We've been done for months." "Done?" The door shook as he slammed his palm against it. "You don't get to decide that. You think that thug can protect you? He's nothing but trash, and you're making a huge mistake." Lily's fingers curled into fists. All those years of fear, of walking on eggshells, of making herself small, something inside her finally snapped. "The only mistake I made was staying with you as long as I did." She raised her voice, letting her anger fuel her courage. "You're the one who's trash, Tom. You're nothing but a bully who can only feel big by making others feel small." "You ungrateful little—" Tom's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "Open this door right now, or I'll break it down." The handle rattled violently. Lily stepped back, her heart racing, but she refused to let fear take over again. She grabbed her phone from the counter, quickly typing a message to Jack. "I've called the police," she lied, her voice steady. "They're on their way." "You're lying." The rattling stopped. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." She moved closer to the door again. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Tom. You can't control me." "You think you're so strong now?" His voice dripped with venom. "Let's see how strong you are when—" The sound of heavy boots climbing the stairs cut him off. Jack appeared at the end of the hallway, his expression dark and focused. He moved with purpose, each step deliberate as he approached. "Problem here?" Jack's voice was low, controlled, but carried an unmistakable threat. Tom spun around, his face twisting with hatred. "This is none of your business. You're at Lily's door, making threats." Jack stopped a few feet away, his presence filling the narrow hallway. "That makes it my business." "She's mine," Tom snarled, taking a step toward Jack. "You're just some lowlife she's using to get back at me." Jack didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply stood there, a mountain of calm strength. "Last chance. Walk away." The two men stared each other down. Tom's hands clenched and unclenched, his expensive suit suddenly looking small and insignificant next to Jack's weathered leather jacket. Finally, Tom's shoulders sagged. He shot a venomous look at the door. "This isn't over," he spat, but his voice had lost its power. "You'll both regret this." He turned and stormed toward the stairs, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. His curses echoed in the stairwell as he disappeared. After Tom's footsteps faded away, Lily unlocked her door with shaking hands. Jack stepped inside, his eyes scanning the apartment before settling on her face. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lily nodded, then shook her head, then let out a small laugh that sounded more like a sob. "I don't know. I stood up to him. I actually stood up to him." Jack's expression softened. "You did good. Real good." He moved to the kitchen, filling a glass with water and bringing it to her. "Here." She accepted the glass, sinking into her worn couch. The morning sunlight streamed through her windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Jack sat beside her, close but not touching, giving her space to process. "He'll be back," she said after a while, staring into the glass. "Maybe not today or tomorrow, but he'll try again. He always does. Then we'll deal with it." Jack's voice was steady, grounding. "But you can't keep living like this, Lily. Looking over your shoulder, jumping at every noise." She set the glass down on her coffee table, turning to face him. "What else can I do? He knows where I work, where I live. He's got connections in this town." Jack was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands clasped together. "I've been thinking about that. Got a friend who owns a restaurant up north, couple hours from here. Small town, good people. He's looking for help managing the place." Lily's breath caught in her throat. "You want me to leave?" "I want you to have a choice." Jack's eyes met hers, sincere and warm. "You could start fresh somewhere new. Somewhere Tom can't reach you." "But my life is here," she whispered, though the words felt hollow even as she said them. "What life?" Jack asked gently. "Working a job you took just to get away from him? Living in an apartment you barely leave because you're afraid of running into him?" Lily stood up, pacing the small living room. The walls suddenly felt close, confining. She stopped at the window, looking out at the city she'd called home her whole life. "I'd be running away." "No." Jack's voice was firm. "You'd be choosing yourself. There's a difference." She turned back to him, wrapping her arms around herself. "Would you—" She hesitated, vulnerable hope in her voice. "Would you come with me?" Jack stood, crossing the room to stand before her. "If you want me to. Got nothing holding me here either." "Just your bike gang," she said with a weak smile. He shrugged, a half-smile playing at his lips. "They'll understand. Some things are more important." Lily looked around her apartment, at the life she'd pieced together after leaving Tom. It was safe, but it wasn't living. Not really. She thought about the freedom she'd felt on the back of Jack's motorcycle, the wind in her hair, the world opening up before her. "When?" she asked, her voice stronger. "Whenever you're ready. Could be tomorrow, could be next week." Jack reached out, taking her hand in his. "Your choice, Lily. Everything from here on out is your choice." She squeezed his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, the promise of protection without possession. "I choose." She took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. "I choose to start over. With you." Jack's smile was warm, reaching his eyes. "Then let's make it happen." Looking up at him, Lily felt something settle in her chest. Not fear or uncertainty, but hope. Real, solid hope for the first time in years. She stepped closer, letting herself be enveloped in his embrace, knowing that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The police station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the worn wooden bench where Lily sat, clutching a manila folder in her trembling hands. Jack stood nearby, his broad frame leaning against the wall, a steady presence in the sterile environment. Officer Sarah Martinez, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair at her temples, approached them with a clipboard. "Miss Thompson? We're ready for you now." Lily stood, smoothing her skirt with sweaty palms. She'd dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that made her feel strong. A navy blazer over a white blouse, dark jeans, and practical flats. Professional, put together. The opposite of how she felt inside. "Would you like me to come with you?" Jack asked softly. She nodded, grateful for his offer. Together, they followed Officer Martinez to a small office where a desk dominated the space, its surface neat and organized. "Please, have a seat," Officer Martinez gestured to the chairs. "Now, I understand you want to file a restraining order?" "Yes." Lily's voice came out steadier than she expected. She opened the folder, revealing carefully documented dates, times, and locations of Tom's harassment. Text messages she'd screenshot, emails she'd saved, witnesses who'd seen his threatening behavior. "I have everything here." Officer Martinez began reviewing the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is very thorough, Ms. Thompson. You've done an excellent job documenting everything." "I've been keeping track since I left him," Lily explained, feeling Jack's supportive presence beside her. I didn't want to believe it would come to this." "Many victims feel the same way," Officer Martinez said gently. "But filing for protection is not a sign of weakness. It's an act of strength." The officer began entering information into her computer, the soft clicking of keys filling the quiet room. Lily felt Jack's hand brush against hers, a silent gesture of support. "Based on what you've provided, we have more than enough evidence to file an emergency protective order," Officer Martinez explained. "This will be temporary, lasting about 2 weeks. During that time, we'll schedule a court hearing for a permanent restraining order." Lily's heart pounded as she signed the necessary paperwork. Each signature felt like another brick in the wall between her and Tom's influence. When she reached the final page, her hand stilled for just a moment. "You've got this," Jack murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. She signed her name with a flourish, the ink dark and bold against the white paper. Officer Martinez made copies of everything, explaining the next steps clearly and patiently. "Once this is served to Mr. Richards, he will be legally prohibited from contacting you in any way. No calls, no texts, no emails. He must stay at least 100 yards away from you, your home, and your workplace." Relief flooded through Lily's body, making her feel lightheaded. The system that had seemed so intimidating was now working to protect her. She had proof, official, legal proof, that Tom's behavior was wrong. As they left the police station, the morning sun warm on their faces, Jack turned to her. I'm proud of you, you know that? Lily squared her shoulders, holding the copies of her restraining order close. For the first time in years, she felt truly empowered. The weight of Tom's threats seemed lighter, manageable. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was someone fighting back, someone taking control of her own safety. "Thank you for being here," she said, looking up at Jack. "For everything." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through Lily's apartment windows as she sat on her couch, staring at the restraining order papers spread across her coffee table. The black and white documents seemed to mock her with their official letterhead and formal language. Her fingers traced the edges of the papers, her mind wandering to darker places. What if this wasn't enough? What if she was just running away instead of actually dealing with her problems? The thought made her chest tight, her breathing shallow. She grabbed her phone and checked her messages for the 100th time. No new texts from Tom. The restraining order was working, at least for now. But somehow, the silence felt more threatening than his constant harassment had been. A gentle knock at her door made her jump. "It's just me," Jack's familiar voice called out. Lily got up and opened the door, finding comfort in Jack's steady presence. He took one look at her face and understood immediately. "You've been overthinking again," he said, not a question but a statement. She nodded, moving back to the couch where the papers lay scattered. Jack followed, settling beside her but giving her enough space to breathe. "I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing," Lily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I'm just running away. Maybe I should have tried harder to fix things with Tom, or—" "Stop right there," Jack interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. He turned to face her fully. "You're not running away. You're protecting yourself." Lily wrapped her arms around herself, fighting back tears. "Then why does it feel like I'm just hiding? Like I'm weak?" Jack's eyes softened as he watched her struggle with the weight of her emotions. "Because that's what he wanted you to believe. That's what abuse does. It makes you doubt yourself, makes you think you're the one who's wrong." She looked at the restraining order again, her vision blurring. I thought I'd feel different after filing it. More confident, more free. But I'm still scared, still doubting everything." "That's normal," Jack said, his rough hands clasping together as he leaned forward. "Healing isn't like flipping a switch. It's more like—" He paused, thinking. "It's like learning to walk again after an injury. You take small steps, you wobble, you might even fall. But each day you get a little stronger." Lily wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been there," he admitted. "Different situation, different demons, but the same doubts. After I left the military, I spent years wondering if I was running from my past or facing it. Took me a long time to realize it's not that simple." His honesty touched something deep inside her. "How did you deal with it?" "By accepting that it's okay to feel conflicted. It's okay to have good days and bad days. The important thing is that you're moving forward, even if it doesn't always feel like it." Lily let out a shaky breath, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Jack was right. Healing wasn't linear. She didn't have to have everything figured out right now. "You're allowed to feel uncertain," Jack continued, his voice steady and reassuring. "You're allowed to be scared, but don't let those feelings make you doubt your strength. What you did today, filing that restraining order, that took real courage." She looked at the papers again, but this time they didn't seem so daunting. They were proof of her decision to choose herself, to fight for her own safety and peace of mind. Maybe that was enough for now. The morning sun warmed their faces as Jack and Lily stood outside the bar where they first met. The building looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more ordinary. Lily's hand tightened around Jack's as memories of that night washed over her. "It's strange," she said, studying the worn brick exterior. "This place used to terrify me. Now it just looks like any other building." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes the scariest places lose their power when you face them in the light." They walked down the street together, their footsteps falling into an easy rhythm. Jack had suggested this. visiting the places that held memories for both of them, good and bad. It was his way of showing her that the past didn't have to be a prison. They passed the diner where they'd shared countless conversations, where Jack had first opened up about his military service. Through the window, Lily could see their usual booth, now occupied by a young couple lost in conversation. "Remember when you first told me about Afghanistan?" Lily asked, glancing at Jack. He squeezed her hand gently. "Yeah, thought you'd run for the hills when I told you everything. But I didn't." "No, you didn't. You just listened. No judgment, no pity, just understanding." They continued their walk, stopping at the small park where they'd spent hours talking about their fears, their hopes, their regrets. The wooden bench where they usually sat was empty, as if waiting for them. Lily settled onto the familiar seat, feeling the grain of the wood beneath her fingers. "I used to think I was broken," she admitted. "Like what happened with Tom had damaged something inside me that could never be fixed." Jack sat beside her, his presence steady and warm. "And now?" She thought about it, watching a pair of sparrows hop across the grass. "Now I think maybe being broken isn't the end of the story. Maybe it's just part of becoming something new." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and distant rain. Jack remained quiet, giving her space to continue. "When I first left Tom, I could only see myself as a victim, someone who needed to be protected." Lily's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "But these past few months, working through everything, I'm starting to see that I'm more than that. I'm someone who can grow, who can change." "You always were," Jack said softly. "You just needed to remember it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching people pass by. Joggers, dog walkers, parents with strollers. Normal people living normal lives. Lily realized she was one of them now, no longer trapped in the shadows of fear and doubt. "Thank you," she said, turning to Jack, "for showing me that the past doesn't have to define us, that we can acknowledge it without letting it control us." Jack's eyes met hers, filled with understanding and something deeper. "You did the hard work yourself. I just walked beside you." Lily smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle in her heart. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was growing, changing, becoming stronger. The memories that once haunted her were losing their power, making room for new experiences, new possibilities. The person she'd been when she first met Jack, frightened, uncertain, looking for protection, was still part of her story. But she wasn't that person anymore. She was becoming someone new, someone who could face her fears and choose her own path forward. Lily's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter as she prepared her morning coffee. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Tom's name on the screen. She took a deep breath, steadying herself against the counter. "You okay?" Jack asked from the living room, where he was reading the morning paper. "It's Tom," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "He's texting again." Jack started to rise, but Lily shook her head. "I need to handle this myself." The message glowed on her screen. "I miss you, Lils. Everything's falling apart without you. I need you. Remember how good we were together in the beginning?" Another text followed quickly. "I've changed. I promise. Just give me one more chance. Please. I'm nothing without you." Lily's hands trembled slightly as she read the messages. 6 months ago, these words would have sent her spiraling into guilt and self-doubt. She would have questioned everything, wondered if she was being too harsh, too unforgiving. She walked to the living room window, watching the morning light filter through the trees. The familiar weight of responsibility for Tom's feelings tried to settle on her shoulders, but this time, she refused to carry it. Her phone buzzed again. "Remember your mom's birthday party? How happy everyone was. We could have that again. I know I messed up, but you're not perfect either. We hurt each other. That's what people do sometimes." Lily felt a flash of anger at his attempt to minimize what he'd done. The psychological wounds from their relationship had taken months to heal. Some were still healing. She thought about the nights she'd spent walking on eggshells, the constant fear of saying or doing the wrong thing, the way he had made her doubt her own memories and feelings. "You're being selfish," his next message read. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw it all away? For some biker? You're better than that, Lily. You're not thinking clearly. She sat down on the couch, aware of Jack's concerned presence, but grateful he was letting her handle this. The morning sun warmed her face as she typed out a response, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Finally, she realized she didn't need to respond at all. The truth hit her with stunning clarity. She didn't owe Tom anything. Not an explanation, not closure, not one more minute of her time or energy. His attempts to manipulate her emotions were so transparent now, like looking at an old magic trick and finally seeing how it was done. Her finger hovered over Tom's contact information. With 3 quick taps, she blocked his number. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. She felt lighter, as if she'd put down a heavy burden she'd been carrying for years. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. "I just blocked him," she said, looking up at Jack. He nodded, pride evident in his eyes. "How do you feel?" "Free," she said, and meant it. "Like I can finally move forward without his shadow hanging over me." She placed her phone face down on the coffee table, a simple gesture that felt deeply symbolic. The morning light streamed through the windows, and for the first time in a long while, Lily felt completely present in the moment, unburdened by the past or anxiety about the future. Tom's desperate attempts to pull her back into his web had only served to show her how far she'd come. She wasn't that frightened woman at the bar anymore. She was stronger now, wiser, and finally ready to embrace whatever came next. The evening sun painted golden streaks across Lily's small apartment as she and Jack sat on her worn but comfortable couch. A half-empty pizza box lay on the coffee table between them, and soft music played from her old radio. Jack had his feet propped up, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Remember that first night at the bar?" Lily asked, tucking her legs underneath her. "I was so scared." Jack's expression softened. "You looked like a deer caught in headlights when Tom walked in." "I was." She picked at a loose thread on her sweater. "But then you showed up, this big, intimidating biker, and somehow that made me feel safe instead of more scared." "Intimidating, huh?" Jack's lips curved into a small smile. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I just couldn't stand by and watch. Something in me knew I had to step in." Lily squeezed his hand. "You never asked for anything in return. You just stayed." "Wasn't planning to," Jack admitted, "but something about you." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "You reminded me that there's more to life than running from the past." The music changed to a slower song, one that filled the room with its gentle melody. Lily leaned her head against Jack's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and his soap. "I used to think I'd never feel normal again," she said quietly, "like I'd always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But sitting here with you, it feels right, natural." Jack shifted to face her better. "You're stronger than you know, Lily. You did the hard work yourself. I just had your back." "You did more than that." She sat up straighter, meeting his eyes. "You showed me what real support looks like. What," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "what love should feel like." The word hung between them, honest and unhurried. Jack's eyes softened, and he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Never thought I'd find this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "After everything, the military, the club, all the mistakes I made, didn't think I deserved it." "We both deserved better than what we thought we deserved," Lily said, thinking of all the times she'd settled for less, all the excuses she'd made for Tom's behavior. Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "So what now? Where do we go from here?" Lily thought about the question. The old fear tried to surface, the worry about making wrong choices, about trusting too much. But it felt distant now, like an echo rather than a scream. "Forward," she said firmly. "Together. No more looking back. No more letting the past control us." "Partners?" Jack asked, and there was vulnerability in his voice that few people ever got to hear. "Partners," Lily agreed, feeling the rightness of it settle in her chest. "In whatever comes next." Jack pulled her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence as the last rays of sunlight faded from the windows. The music played on, filling the space between them with its gentle rhythm. But they were content just being there. Two people who had found something unexpected and precious in each other's broken pieces. The last traces of daylight painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink as Jack and Lily stood on her small apartment balcony. The evening breeze carried the scent of summer flowers from the park across the street, and somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. Jack leaned against the railing, his leather vest hanging loose and comfortable. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, but his body remained angled toward Lily, as if drawn to her presence. She stood close enough that their shoulders touched, finding comfort in his steady warmth. "You know," Lily said softly, "I used to hate sunsets." She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the memory. They meant another night of walking on eggshells around Tom, wondering what might set him off. Jack's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of Tom's name, but his voice remained gentle. And now? A small smile played across Lily's lips. Now they feel like a promise, like every day, no matter how hard, has something beautiful at the end of it. Jack turned to face her, his usually stern features softened by the fading light. The tattoos on his arms seemed less harsh, more like art than the marks of a troubled past. "You see beauty in everything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Even in someone like me." Lily reached out and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "Especially in you, Jack." She could feel his heartbeat under her palm, strong and steady. "You showed me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that hurts or controls, but the kind that protects and supports." He covered her hand with his own, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "You did the same for me," he admitted. "Showed me there was more to life than just surviving, more than the guilt and the anger I'd been carrying." The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, leaving them in the soft blue light of dusk. A street lamp flickered to life below, casting long shadows across the balcony. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" Lily said, letting out a small laugh. "A former biker and an abuse survivor, both learning how to trust again." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Jack replied, his lips curving into that rare smile she'd grown to love. He pulled her closer, one hand resting at the small of her back. "You make me want to be better, Lily, to face everything I've been running from." She looked up at him, seeing past the tough exterior to the man who'd stood beside her through her darkest moments. "You already are better," she whispered. "We both are." The city lights twinkled around them like earthbound stars, and a peaceful silence settled between them. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence of fear or uncertainty that Lily had known before, but rather the kind that came with complete trust and understanding. Jack's hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing softly across her skin. His eyes met hers, full of tenderness and something deeper, something that spoke of commitment and choice. Lily lifted her face to his, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home. It wasn't their first kiss, but it carried the weight of their shared journey, of all they'd overcome together. In that moment, they both knew that while their path forward might not always be easy, they'd chosen each other, and that choice was enough to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.